Sup, nerds! I want to talk, as I promised you, a little bit about J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan and how I think that it's about queer issues and potentially the fact that J.M. Barrie might have himself been a queer person of some kind. I am basing this off of a little bit of a twisted encyclopedic knowledge of this book that I've been obsessed with since I was a little kid. I'm basing this off of also some facts about J.M. Barrie's life that are common knowledge. I'm not basing this on any sort of research or anything like that. Unless you count how many times I've read this book and different iterations of it as research, which you should not, by the way. But anyway, this is just purely fan fiction that you're going to hear, but I think some of it has to be rooted in reality. I really, truly do. The first thing I want to talk about is something that I've brought up like before 1,000 times here and on Twitter, and it's about fairies and how J.M. Barrie describes fairies. It's something that you've probably heard before. Hello Kitty. In other media, Hook references the first part of the definition of fairies as described by J.M. Barrie. That definition of fairies is that when the first baby laughed for the first time, the laugh broke into 1,000 pieces and they all went skipping about. That was the beginning of fairies. But the definition doesn't end there. The definition of fairies goes on to describe that from then on, every girl human and every boy human all get a gender-matched fairy at birth. And that fairy is theirs until they stop believing in fairies. Right? Well, my boy Peter didn't get one. So Peter runs away from home because he doesn't want to grow up. We all know that part. He goes and runs away to Kensington Gardens where he meets Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is Peter's fairy, and she's described throughout the book as his fairy in every single way, the same as how any other little girl or boy gets their fairy. Now, to me, that's a pretty solid start for part of, at the very least, the queer relation we can see in this book. But it goes beyond that, because what does everybody think Peter Pan is about? Everybody thinks Peter Pan is about not wanting to grow up, especially little boys not wanting to grow up. And I get it. Yes, men, children, but I don't actually think that's what Barrie's talking about at all. And then when you take a look back at Barrie's life, I think that becomes clearer. And J.M. Barrie was married to a lovely woman who he loved, but was not physical with, did not want to have children with, and did not really seem romantically interested in. He respected her. And that's where we get Wendy. So part of this goes back to how J.M. Barrie describes women throughout the book. When he talks about growing up, he's always talking about it as an evil thing for men to do. Men who grow up are doing a disgusting, despicable thing. And the suggestion that he do it and become a man is a disgusting and despicable thing to do. Women, however, are understood when they want to grow up. He gets it. Peter even expresses jealousy at Wendy for getting to go home and grow up and facilitates her doing so. He even expresses jealousy several points in the book about her name, her appearance, things like that. Again, not hatred, not anger, jealousy. So with regard to Wendys tragedy, Wendy, as all women are, is born with a hidden kiss, a special secret thing that only women have. And this kiss belongs to someone predetermined. And Wendy's tragedy is that her kiss belongs to Peter Pan, a boy who will never be able to return the feeling she has for him. And it's not that he doesn't want to. Peter expresses multiple times throughout this book that he is interested. he wants to feel and participate in these grown-up things, but he can't understand them. The relation to growing up queer that I see here is growing up and seeing everybody start to have feelings almost like all at once and express them almost all at once with like stumbling, but with relative ease and understanding, and being there amidst it all, thinking that something about the way I was seeing it wasn't making sense. Wanting it, wanting to feel it, but struggling to define it and struggling to understand the language that everyone is suddenly speaking around you. And I think that that's what Peter Pan is expressing more often than any sort of disgust with love or disgust with romance. In fact, the whole reason he meets Wendy in the first place is because he sneaks over to her window at night to hear love stories, romance stories, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. The other one that I have to bring up is Captain Hook and Peter Pan's feud in the first place. In my eyes, without a queer narrative over it, I don't even think it makes any sense. Because Captain Hook hates Peter Pan not for cutting off his arm and feeding it to the crocodile. I mean, that's in there for sure. But repeatedly when he confronts Peter Pan, what he's yelling at him for is for being non-compliant. Literally calls him insolent over and over again. And for what? And it's stated in the book multiple times that Captain Hook hates Peter Pan for refusing to become a man. And Peter Pan hates Captain Hook not because he's a mean pirate who hurts people, because he doesn't frankly care about that. It's because he's a man, and he hates that. So Peter Pan doesn't hate growing up because he hates age or mortality or the passage of time. He hates growing up because growing up means that Peter Pan would need to get put into a specific role, that role being man, and that role coming with a certain defined structure and list of responsibilities and actions and behaviors that he disagrees with. Frankly, I relate to that entirely. And it informs why Peter Pan is unoffended when Wendy wants to grow up and become a woman, because that's not something that offends him, because that's not a box that he is going to be put into himself. We could also touch on the fact that a woman traditionally plays Peter Pan, or how Mr. Darling and Hook are always played by the same actor, but those are always like recurring theater traditions as well, so it probably has nothing to do with it. Somehow I feel like I'm leaving things out, but I don't know. I can't think anymore. So we'll consider this part one, I guess, of this, whatever this is. If any of you take literally anything away from this video, and it will surprise me if that is true, I hope genuinely it is that you know in your heart that you have a fairy and that they match your true gender and not whatever one was assigned to you at birth. I also hope that you know that at any point you can defy whatever role society has put on you and you can make your own. And you don't need to run away to do that. Or you can, whichever. But I don't know. Peter Pan's not a really good life lesson. I just think it's a story full of a lot of pain and adult kind of pain that is terrible to watch when you're watching it through the lens of a children's story. And that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, sorry.